We're excited to have you join us today for a conversation on AI and how AI can make your business more effective, more efficient, and help you grow. You know, there's been a lot of conversation about AI and how to use AI. I look back, and I think many of you might be the same. I was first introduced to AI with ChatGPT. And I remember I was at my son's hockey game, and one of the dads showed me about this ChatGPT. And I went on there, and being a smart aleck, I put in there, "Why is my wife always so grumpy with me?" And I got this very long dissertation, which basically was, "It's not her, it's you."
Oh.
And so
This thing will never work.
the harsh truths of AI came to life for me on that particular front. But when we think about AI and the opportunities that it has for our business, there are also potentially some consequences and considerations. And some of them are a little out there, like, are these machines going to rise up and take over us and rule the world? To more relevant ones, such as, how is this going to affect my business? How it's going to affect the culture of my business? And so we are really fortunate today to have our panelists here who are experts in the field, and they're going to offer their insights and experiences to help think about how you can transform your business and how your business can use AI. And our panelists really cover a wide spectrum of AI. We have Dr. Gene Lee, he likes to be called Gene, so we'll call him Gene from now on, who's an assistant professor at UBC. He is a professor in the Information Systems and Analytics team at UBC, so we have the academic world covered. And we have Marc Lowe from KPMG. Marc is a Director of Innovations, Growth and Emerging Technology at KPMG. And then finally, we also have Jordan Atkins. Jordan is a very new to BMO client, and his family is the owner and operator of WTC Group. They're probably BC's top logistics and transloading company. I did a recent tour of their facility, which is massive, and it's eerie of how few people are there. It is one of the most automated facilities that you will see. There's just really, I think Jordan calls them babysitters, watching to make sure things don't go offside. So it's like I said, we've got a wide range of experience and knowledge on AI for you today. So let's start with talking a little bit about AI. I think if you ask 10 people, what is AI, you're going to get 10 different answers. So I'm going to start off by asking Gene, how would you define AI?
Yeah, thank you. First, thank you very much for having me today, and great to meet you, everybody. My first AI class was 20 years ago. So back then, it was just a toy. So if people ask the question back at the time, this is just a toy. But now if I ask again, AI is really changing the world. So I would say three things. So first, you need, so AI is getting data from external world. So it's analyzing the data to make decisions. So that was the 5 years ago definition. Now AI is creating new artifacts. So based on data, it learns from the data, and it makes decision and can make a recommendation and create new things. So that's my definition.
Excellent. And can you talk a little bit about the type of research you've done on how businesses can use AI?
Yeah, thank you. So actually, I've been working on AI research for the last 20 years. Actually, my PhD students are there with us. All the difficult questions can be answered by them later on. So my research has been on how AI can be used in different sectors, such as in the innovation, in the process automation, and also in the creativity, innovation, and also in education. Actually, many of our research is on how we can use AI in our education and in different sectors. That's my research.
Excellent. And Marc, can you talk a little bit about the practice that you're involved with at KPMG and why everyone here may want to hire you after this meeting today to help them with AI?
Well, I lead a group called Ignition at KPMG. It's our Innovation and Emerging Tech group. As the name implies, we're trying to spark ideation and creativity and help clients kind of understand really what's coming around the corner. One of the challenges with AI is, you don't really know where to start. right? You're trying to wrap your head around like, how is this going to impact my business? And most organizations are trying to force fit or place AI inside legacy processes, legacy organizations. So the work is really to help clients unpack what that means for them, get fingers on keyboards in the case of generative AI and experiment and try to make that real for them, and then go all the way through to implementation and see those solutions being pushed into clients. So yeah, super challenging, exciting work. Similarly touching the stuff that you're articulating there, and yeah, touching a variety of industries, everything from manufacturing, supply chain, logistics, retail, the whole gamut, as you might expect with KPMG. We've got a very, very broad portfolio of clients similar to BMO.
That's great. Thank you. And Jordan, tell us about WTC.
So WTC Group is a leader in integrated marine logistics and has been in operation since 2002. We're asset-based and very vertically integrated. We touch some of the largest commodities that Canada imports and exports, and are fortunate enough to interact with most other members of the supply chain. So we're in a bit of a unique position at the apex of a variety of very large shipping companies like marine container shipping companies, rail companies, exporters, importers, et cetera. And with that comes a variety of data and information that needs to be balanced and communicated between those parties in a timely fashion. So although there are pinch points when that data flow doesn't move as quickly or as accurately as it should, there's also a lot of opportunities to leverage efficiencies that compound over a variety of different partners that we operate with. So.
Excellent. Thank you. So, Jean, let's start with you. From your perspective, how has the perception of AI in the business world evolved in recent years, and what do you think is still misunderstood?
Yeah, great question. So in the maybe 5-10 years ago, it was really predictive analytics. So based on data, predict the future. That was the most applications. With the Gen AI, I think people got like ChatGPT was a moment. Like all of a sudden, everybody now sees, oh, AI is there. Actually, ChatGPT 3. I used ChatGPT 1 when it was when just starting. It was really like the kind of toy, as I mentioned before. But 3.5, it's trying to actually do something real. So people got suddenly so excited. Like if it's just use ChatGPT, everything is going to go well. It's actually not the case, because if you want to do AI for your business, you have to have your data ready. Because unless you have the data, you can't really have a competitive advantage. So I think one of the misconceptions is that AI is just the magic silver bullet. Actually, you need to have data first ready to do that, and also it takes time. So some of the small things, gimmicky things, can be done in short-term period, but it really needs some serious investment that will take some long time. Yeah, that's the misconception I see. Yeah.
Great. And when we initially talked, you talked about the different phases in AI. Can you talk a little bit about them?
So great. So I would say 3 phases. So first is the awareness. I guess you are all here, so you're aware that AI is real. So first, awareness, what part of my business can I use AI? That's the first step. The second step will be to have a strategy. Okay, so the executive level should have an understanding of what AI is, how AI can be used in my own business, the strategy. And the third step is actually, as Marc mentioned, the implementation, which is the nitty-gritty detail. Devils are always in the detail. So I would say awareness, strategy, and implementation, 3 phases.
Great. Okay, well, let's pull on that thread a little bit more, and we'll talk about the different stages. So let's talk about awareness. Jordan, what were some of the key business drivers or pain points that initially sparked your need to explore AI?
Well, I think just to elaborate for a moment on Jean's point there, I think the data collection and the cleaning process or the normalization of that data set is one of the most important first steps of AI application, because we spent the better part of, I would say, the first 5 years of our digital transformation allocating most of our resources to understanding, A, what data we should be collecting or could collect, and then B, trying to structure that in such a way that it made sense for those practical applications that you were trying to achieve. So on the high level, obviously there's predictive analytics, there's dynamic forecasting, there's seasonal log jams that you're trying to avoid on shipping basis as a logistics company. And then you go down and zoom in a little bit, and you've got the microscopic improvements, say in the yard mapping or the manner in which that you handle containers or organize trucks coming into your facility that are going to alleviate some of those physical limitations of the terminals. So I think really at first we started with the small steps, trying to improve container handles per shipment, trying to reduce truck trips to the port, those sorts of things. And then as we got into it and realized how much more potential there was, those first small wins informed the next few steps in our journey.
Excellent. Marc, what are some of the other challenges that companies you support are trying to solve when they consider implementing AI?
Well, I mean, on the assumption that they believe they should do it, which I think is still surprisingly, those conversations are very real. Like I think organizations trying to figure out, I'm going to spend X, and the mindset is, I'm going to spend X. It's got a pencil to Y benefit to create, Z bottom line, right? Some of those discussions are still challenging to frame, in a very, specific kind of a way. It's different than, I'm going to rip and replace my ERP. So I'm going to spend, X millions on SAP to put it inside my organization, but I understand how I can make that business case. AI is different. So I think, first stage is, as both my panelists here have articulated, is getting a firm sense of my world has shifted as an organization, so I need to do something. You get clarity around that as a leadership group, and now we need to, focus and orient our attention and our efforts. That's kind of, I think that conversation is still very, very real. Interesting, as you're talking about ChatGPT 3.5. So when ChatGPT 3.5 hit, KPMG, it became. We were talking before the panel.
Yeah.
ChatGPT 3.5 came out. It kind of sucked the oxygen out of the room. It was like that became the point of focus, kind of across the board. And so we started polling Canadian organizations, just to understand who's doing what, how, the rate of adoption, what are the use cases, that kind of stuff. So 3 years ago, the rate of adoption was extremely low across Canada. Like by the end of 2023, the adoption was like in the high 20s, basically across the board. In Canada now, we're up into the mid 70s. You'll be pleased to know, as a Vancouver audience, that we are slightly above Ontario. So if any of your Toronto colleagues are giving you a hard time, just tell them, hey, BC's actually ahead of the game. But what's great to see is, that it's accelerating, so organizations are adopting it, but still, I say, in that 70-something%, a lot of that is I'm doing Microsoft Copilot, I'm experimenting with ChatGPT, so we're not really driving massive sort of transformative change, right? So there's still some work to do there. Then, as Jean's articulated for sure, data is a huge one. The technology skills, as the technology improves, it's getting harder and harder to get those people inside your organization to build, and organizations are reluctant to be dependent on a KPMG or a third party. So there's all those elements. Those are for sure true. And then the last piece is, I think, just the organizational change around it. Like at the end of the day, these are technologies that humans use, and humans are the sticking point in any adoption and any transformation. So it's that human element of getting your organization, the people inside your organization, along for that journey, getting those transformations to really stick. And then that's what ultimately creates your return or your value creation inside the business, is to get those tools embedded, change those workflows, and get your people to be really embracing it. And that's where you drive that transformative change.
Yeah, we talked about that earlier. Changing potentially the culture of your business
Big time.
is a really important thing. And something to consider, because obviously it can have an impact given many people are resistant to technology change at times.
Yeah.
Jean, for businesses that at this point haven't found a specific role that AI can play, where can they look within their operations to find areas that can benefit from AI?
Right. So I just want to go back to the data. So whenever you have a lot of data sitting out there, I think that's the opportunity. Mm-hmm. And if the task is routine task that can be codified, that's repeated, like that someone like your employees don't want to do it, but it's a repeated task. That's the low-hanging fruit, I would say. Yeah.
Excellent, thank you. It was interesting when talking with Jean before this. I always thought of AI as generating revenue opportunities, like in banking, it's going to get us more leads and things like that. But Jean really pointed to how in most businesses it's operational efficiency where AI can really drive the most value.
Yep.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about strategy then, the second phase in AI. So Jordan, once you've decided to implement AI, How did you approach building a strategy that aligned with your business goals?
Well, I think strategically, to the point you just made, there's a misconception about where the largest benefits are for organizations to implement this. And from our perspective, we saw it from the beginning as a cost saving or an efficiency play, creating a more sustainable supply chain for us and our customers. And so we really, to Gene's point, went for the low-hanging fruit to start, where it was automating simple tasks, collecting, aggregating, and utilizing and leveraging the data to improve our decision-making at the operations level. And then we worked our way up the chain from there. And I think we were a little bit lucky in the sense that we had started harvesting and cleaning this data before the AI aha moment kind of hit. And so we kind of fell into this benefit of having all of this information and being able to quickly apply it and reap some immediate benefits. But I think, Marc pointed out, there's a long curve on the ROI of some of these implementations, and you spend a lot of time and effort and money before you start to see the benefits. But I can tell you from somebody who was convincing the board to pump money into something that wasn't going to have an impact for a few years, once you do start to reap those benefits, we wouldn't ever go back to the pre-AI application days at WTC for sure. There's a concrete impact that starts to show, I would say, a few years into your journey, and then it really compounds, and each little victory accentuates the benefit of the next tool that you're trying to implement.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I learned when I was on the tour with you, you take in a lot of materials, repackage them, and then they go back out again. And this was a bagging line. I forget what it was, some fancy chemical name that you were product that
Petrochemicals, plastic resin.
That you were bagging, and you said it only takes a couple days for the machines to learn the exact precise size of the bag that is most appropriate,
yes,
the amount of material that it goes in. And I assume that learning has dramatically improved over time since you first implemented AI.
Yeah, and on a terminal level, I mean, when you're handling tens of thousands of containers a quarter, even a small elimination of some empty movements or some additional container handles will have an outsized impact on your carbon footprint, on the time each employee spends on their individual tasks. I mean, convincing the machine operator that you want to 3D map his environment and he's got to put in some extra time on the front end is difficult. But once he sees that, hey, I don't need to move 17 containers out of the way for that shipment next month because the program had the foresight to tell me where to stack it most efficiently, he's on board right away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Neat. Marc, when you're talking strategy, who should be at the table?
In a perfect world, which we never get, in a perfect world, it's a board and a C-suite conversation to start. I think that's what we're starting to see is those leadership groups really coming to the table saying, again, this is transformative now. What do we do about it? Certainly for the last 2 years has been very heavily driven out of IT, which is probably not super surprising, like drawing on some of the stuff that Gene's referencing, the availability of data and the people that maintain that infrastructure. The trouble is there that if your IT group defines your AI strategy, it's going to be confined, first of all, as typically it's a handbrake in terms of they don't want to maintain a whole bunch of stuff. So as all the people in the business are coming saying, hey, what about this one? I tried Grok, right? We were talking about this before the panel. I tried Grok, can we do that? And the IT guy's going like, please, God, no, I'm thinking about all these security concerns and whatever, right? So it becomes a handbrake. And so IT's got to be part of that conversation to enable it, but really it's got to be driven at a leadership group level to try to understand, like you're articulating, right? I can increase the throughput in my organization by X. How do I get that done? What are the right tools? How do we do that? And then we set the course from there. So set the strategy first. IT is the IT group becomes an enabler of that process.
So Gene, once a business has identified a need, what's kind of the next steps, or what's a template to kind of move forward on that basis?
Great question. So now I can wear my academic hat here. So actually, I want to introduce one of my research, actually one of my students who's graduating with a PhD soon. So we have analyzed thousands of US firms who have adopted AI for the last 10 years, more than 10 years. And we see so we analyze their annual reports, their strategy documents, with thousands of documents, and see how they use AI. So first is the awareness piece that we just talked about. Two strategies that was emerging from them. So first is their product innovation. So they're using into their product development, coming up with new ideas. So that's a product. And then the second portion is what Jordan and Marc was mentioning, the process side. So there's product innovation and process innovation. So, and then we also, not just strategy, we also saw what happened afterwards into their ROI. So the innovation in the product side gained short-term returns. They could get it in a couple of years. They could see some benefits. But what was interesting and surprising was that once you put it into your internal process, it took some time, as Marc and Jordan mentioned. It takes about 4 or 5 years to get realized. But once it's there, the ROI, the return is significant. So that's what we found from the academic research. Yeah.
That's great. And Marc, that sounds all great in theory, but what are some of the barriers to adoption that you see?
Well, you've talked a little bit about it. Resistance to change is one of it. I think, we're living in this digital world where, I don't know what your days look like. My days is like a couple hundred emails, Teams messages relentlessly. If somebody's not finding me on email and Teams, they're sending me an SMS or a WhatsApp. It's like you're in digital overwhelm all the time. And so that's part of the story is, I think there's a bit of a sense of like, please God, not another tool. Don't change, don't give me something else I got to figure out, right? So that there's that whole piece. There's also something that's really core to certainly like generative AI, right? Which is, generative AI, this was so interesting about somebody who's been in the space for 20 years, right? Is that historically AI has been the domain of data scientists and computer scientists, right? And so it was kind of it was activity that was in some corner of the business, and then they were taking a business problem, like how do I increase throughput? Somebody would build a model, and you would just, it was a system that somebody built that would get implemented. Generative AI is now in everybody's hands, and it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out it's going to change the work that we do. And the work that we do pays our mortgages, pays our school fees for our children, right? So there's something that's very core to what this technology implies that gives people that immediate like fight or flight response. And so that's again part of the story is how do you build up a safe environment for your teams to experiment with it? And this is the harder bit. If you unlock for knowledge work, and it's different I think there's also a contextual story here around the type of business that you operate. So if you operate something where your supply chain and your competitive advantage is your moat is that you own that asset, right? You're trying to optimize the use of that asset, or a mine or something. You're trying to pull more copper out of the ground. Cool, like easier kind of use case because you're not worried about somebody taking the mine away from you. You're trying to optimize those operations. In knowledge work, it is different. If you unlock, say, 15 to 20% utility inside your organizations, like KPMG did when we launched our GPT tools, the harder question for leadership is what do you do with that 15 to 20%? And so that begets the question coming back to strategy of, great, okay, I'm 15 to 20% more efficient in my business. Is my business going to be twice as big revenue-wise or half as big headcount-wise? That's the fundamental question for this era. The thing that I really take kind of hope in and I get really excited about is if you look outside those windows, it's not as if the world is super rosy, right? There's lots of interesting problems to solve for. And being able to take these tools and really use them as levers for your organization, it opens up really interesting avenues for problems that you can solve for. That's how value gets created, and that's how legacy for the organizations in this room, that's what you can create. So I get really excited by that lens. But I think when you think about those initial conversations of, hey, we want to put generative AI inside the business, it's resistance to change. And we've talked about some of the things around accessibility of data, infrastructure, cost, and so on. I think those kind of, at this point, go without saying, so I won't rehash.
And Gene, we've heard a lot of people talk about so far ROI. So the ROI of AI can be very positive and significant. But I think one of the terms we learned from the first Trump administration was unintended consequences. So what are some of the unintended consequences or things you need to think about in your organization as a result of some actions you're taking with AI?
Yeah, great question. So I want to go back to what Marc is, the resistance to this adoption. Actually, people are worrying about their jobs. Like if we put this Gen AI tools, am I losing my job? In fact, many of the entry jobs are actually going away. Unfortunately, that's what we're seeing from the market. So I think AI has to be adopted in a responsible way, so that your workers are embracing this. And then actually, I'm doing a study on labor unions and then the impact on the AI. So the workers, if they feel secure about their position, they are more willing to adopt this AI tool. So I think for the executive perspectives, I think it has to be an enhancing tool instead of replacing tool. If you have that message well to your workers, I think there will be less resistance. Another unintended consequences is the cybersecurity and confidentiality issue. So data is your asset. So if you put it out there in ChatGPT, the OpenAI will use it for what, God knows what, right? So one way to secure your asset is to have your internal AI tools, which is not that difficult to build, actually. Many of the companies are using open models and then put it into their system and then fine-tune the model for your internal purposes. So unintended consequences and the confidentiality is one thing you want to consider. Yeah.
It was interesting when talking with Gene, he mentioned the union side of things, and you would think of companies with unions, it's more difficult to get the union to do anything different. It's always a battle. I think you said your research showed that AI actually works better in union environments because people feel more secure about their job. Right? It's a natural thing. If you're worried about losing your job, you're going to be resistant to this particular change. But given the union environment, they feel more comfortable with their jobs, and there's probably more proactivity in engaging the workers to say, hey, this is not a thing to get rid of you, and there's probably different cross-training, et cetera, to find them new roles, and that makes AI adoption more effective.
Correct, yeah.
So Marc, as you think about the strategy, what are some parts of the business that can't or shouldn't be changed?
Difficult question.
Yeah, it is a difficult question. On the generative AI front, I got to say, at this point, I would say there are no parts of the business that shouldn't be changed. I think there are parts of the business that are certainly harder to change, based on some of the stuff that we've talked about earlier. I'm going to take your question, I'm going to tweak it ever so slightly, which is to say, not so much about what shouldn't change, it's more a posture that we caution organizations not to take as a result of the capability. We were talking in the prep for the panel, which earlier when we were just having a chat, we were talking about AI and the game Go, AlphaGo, right?
Yep.
Imagine for a second you are playing online poker against AI. Why would you bother? Right? That market will be completely wiped out. We live in this sort of money ballification of business era, right? Where everybody's optimizing for the last couple of percent. And there's actually an interesting article that came out in the New York Times talking about how one of the challenges of baseball at the moment is it's super boring because everyone's driven by analytics, and you've taken some of the magic out of the game. Business, I'm going to get on my soapbox for just a second. Business is not just the creation of shareholder value. Shareholder value is the result of a fantastic customer experience done at scale. Humans, we moved from a hunting type of society. Anthropologists try to figure out, why do we go from hunters to farmers? There's got to be an answer that's better than, well, vegetables don't move around as much, right? We could do something as a society that was different when we came together and we created value in a different way, right? We created systems of money and systems of politics around that to govern it, and business is kind of an extension of that whole story. I think the trap of the AI era is the money ballification of business, and that everything becomes kind of milquetoast. It's like a Where's Waldo of my brand. because everybody's got the tool, so everybody can do a million iterations of your SEO, a million iterations of your pay-per-click campaign. You can spin up a million product images to put in the market, and at the end of the day, if everybody's doing that, nobody's differentiated. And so I think that the trick is, how do you figure out how to use these tools to elevate the people inside your business and lean into the uniquely human characteristics that only humans can bring forward? That will be the differentiating factor. I know Twitter's kind of out of vogue, but the reason that the blue tick on Twitter was valuable is because it was, you were saying, well, this is a real human who's doing something. It's actually Marc who's commenting, and that had value. And I think that that's actually where the pendulum will shift the other way, which is that we figure out how to use the tools in a way that amplify our human voices and really bring the core of our brands to the fore. So that's really where I think we shouldn't change is do the things that made your organizations great. Just do it at scale, amplify it. That's really what will allow you to succeed in Sarah.
That's really interesting. You talk, it really points to culture and your reason for being as a business, right? You can't lose sight of that and get too absorbed into all the data.
And I think clients still want that human element. You don't want to be reaching out to an organization that is mathematical, cold, logical, data-driven only. You want that human touch in your interactions with the service providers that you use. Yeah,
exactly. That's some of my team is here today, and they are sick and tired of me saying you cannot have a relationship over Teams, right? You have to meet people face to face. That's how you develop a real relationship. So let's move forward and talk a little bit about the implementation phase. So Jordan, you're a great example of successful implementation of AI. What were your first steps, and what did you learn or need to learn in order to become proficient at using AI?
Well, I think there's the strategic element. So the decision to delve into or dip your toe in the pool, so to speak, was step one. I think there's a communication aspect as well, which I'll touch on a bit later. But really, I think the first step for the implementation, once that decision was made and everybody was on board, is the data side of things. I mean, if you don't have clean, good data, garbage in, garbage out. And AI doesn't fix that. You need to train these models on good data. And to Jean's point, there is that concern around security and privacy. We've actually taken some of our modeling in-house, and it's quite effective when you take these open models and you apply them to internal data, on your own rigs, doing your own calculations. Also removes a little bit of latency, so we actually get quicker responses when we're making those calculations in-house. I mean, there's a reason that the Tesla autopilot is calculated on board the car in case the internet connection lags, you don't crash into the barrier on the highway. There's not such a security necessitation on our side, because really this is about predictive flows and directing traffic, not actually driving machines yet. But I think that really that data piece is of core importance, and it takes the most time to get right. We spent a lot of years playing tug of war between the engineering team, the data analytics team, the R&D team, talking about how we were going to structure this, what was going to be the most valuable, what metrics were really the fat that you could trim from certain situations, et cetera. So I think having that solid base upon which to apply the AI to then leverage into your KPIs or whatever goals you've set as an organization is the very first and most important step that you got to get right from the beginning.
So I've heard a lot of you, or all three of you, talk about good data. Can maybe one of you just take that and run with a little bit? Like, what is good data versus bad data, and how do you make your data good?
No, this is you all day.
Well, so there are two types of data. I'm going to use some technical terms here. There are structured data. These are your Excel spreadsheets. These are numbers that you can get. So do you use like SQL and different databases to collect those? It has to be well defined. Like, these are the things I'm going after. And then there's also unstructured data. These are textual, image, and video data. Like, a lot of hypes are going on in there. These are difficult to manage, actually. It's larger data sets. It needs a bit more technicality, but it's possible. So these are the good data. The good data set is actually, you need to have a good question first. So what am I going after? and then you start collecting data. If you just start collecting data, and then later you realize, oh, okay, I forgot to do this. So I think before you start collecting data, you have a good question. What is your question? And then what is the relevant data you go after? So that's what I would say, a good data set. Yes.
It reminds me of the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, where, what's the secret to the universe? And the answer is 21. And it's like, that's not the answer. And it's like, well, that's not the right question. And that's a really good point, is you've got to have the right direction. The prompt, the thought process is, I think, extremely important in application.
Yeah, it's similar to what you hear about ChatGPT. The more information you give it, the better response that you get. I was telling the guys, I was doing a NHL hockey pool, and I'd put in there who will be the scoring leaders this year, and one of them came out was Mike Bossy. So obviously I did not define it well enough for the AI to give the correct answers that I was looking for. And I did not win my hockey pool.
Not with Mike Bossy.
Was not able to figure it out.
May I just jump on the question just for 1 second there, which is just, I'll give you a small anecdote, just going back to this idea of when IT leads the conversation, or the dynamic between, excuse me, leaders in IT. So working with a real estate organization here in Vancouver, and we're talking about exactly this, right? Where does the data sit? How, what's the quality of it, et cetera? And it's all the stuff that Gene's describing there. A mix of structured and unstructured data. And the IT guy says, well, it's all in SharePoint, right? There's this is frustrated, and I don't know if there's any IT people in the room, but this is a very IT kind of point. It's it's there, just, why is this so hard, was kind of like the thing, because he'd spent all these years getting the SharePoint implementation up, and no, but nobody's tagging data the right way. It's all in different folders. It's on their personal hard drive. They think it's SharePoint, and the IT guy's freaking out. Leadership's going, it shouldn't be this hard. Right, and so it's those dynamics, of the human dynamics of, so first is understanding what's the quality of your data, where does it sit, and so on, and then there's the human element of actually driving process change around, and I'm actually as an AI person at KPMG, I'm terrible with this, so a whole bunch of PowerPoints and stuff sit on my personal drive, and drives my people crazy. It's exactly that. It's the human change of we do things a particular way, and so you need to build some of that organizational muscle as well to categorize stuff effectively. It's metadata tagging. It's all that kind of stuff that will ultimately drive the system. I'm talking specifically about knowledge work, not so much about looking at pure operational data.
So just delving into that a little deeper, what skills or capabilities should business leaders be building internally to prepare their teams for an AI-enabled future?
Is that for me? First and foremost, I think curiosity. We see it all the time. If you are talking to your CEO, I think I'm largely talking to a room of sort of CEOs here, right? But if your people are talking to you and they're talking about some tool and they're looking at you and you're not the one that's actually at the front of the bus, that comes through super, super quickly, right? So, the first imperative is encouragement for everybody. Is if you're not really driving the tools, and there's kind of two ways to drive those use of those tools. Talking now about sort of generative AI specifically. One is the kind of just make it work type of attitude, which is I don't want to go and sift through a bunch of models. I just want the answer. Who's going to lead? Who's going to win my hockey pool? And then there's the kind of make it really good, which is I really deeply understand the process I'm trying to drive, the question I'm trying to ask, and how do I get value from this tool. And as leaders in the business, you have to be in those tools and proficient and really sort of driving that change. That begets the kind of the curiosity inside the organization. The leadership is seen to be doing those things, and that's what really kind of rallies people around it. So the first, I think, is definitely curiosity, creating that culture of curiosity, interaction, experimentation. Make it safe for people to experiment and fail. Make it safe for people to bring ideas to the table. We talked about Grok as we were in preparation for the panel, right? So there's this whole universe of tools. Encourage your team members to get out and experiment with the tools, bring those ideas forward, and create, it doesn't have to be a formal center of excellence, right? It's a very consulting term, but just a culture whereby you are proliferating knowledge inside your organization. There was a really interesting memo by Toby Lutke, who's the CEO of Shopify, It's a tiny Canadian company you might have heard of. And he sent out an internal memo, which subsequently got leaked. And so then he said, okay, well, I'm going to get out in front of this, and here's my commentary on what the memo was. And the memo, if you haven't read it, I highly, highly encourage you to read it. I think it's kind of a 9-point view of how AI is going to change Shopify. And what's really interesting is that the top of the house at Shopify is saying, first of all, we're an AI-first organization from today. So everything that we do is going to be with an AI-first lens. If you come to me and say, Toby, I need headcount for this project, the next question I'm going to give you is,
can AI do it?
Can AI do it, right? And your responsibility, everybody's responsibility, is to go out, learn something, and bring that knowledge back to the organization and proliferate it to your teammates so that it creates from the top of the house all the way through the organization this culture of experimentation, learning, knowledge proliferation. That's what creates an organization that's able to transform from something legacy to this new kind of AI era. The organizations that are building AI first are the ones that are not constrained by the things that the organizations that we've already built, right? And so they're thinking about that from first principles and saying, well, do I need to build an organization that's thousands of people deep? No, I don't actually, because I can leverage tools here and there and build workflows and so on. If I built a port from day one, right? Would I staff it with people, or would I do it with largely with machines? So that's a different kind of discussion. But anyway, top of the house. Experimentation, make it safe for people to fail, encourage people to go out, experiment, bring that knowledge back, and then turn that into a virtuous cycle where your organization can transform.
I think there were two really important points there. The first being that the constraints of the existing ecosystem, where the new mover has the advantage in the implementation of a lot of these tools because they're building it from zero. And we had a very similar experience internally where we were trying to convert a legacy system piece by piece, module by module, and eventually, after many months of frustrating setbacks, we said, let's leave 1.0 as is, and let's build 2.0 from the ground up with no preconceived notions about how we were going to structure anything. If we had to map this perfectly from zero today, how would we do it? And that was really important. And the second piece that you touched on that I wholeheartedly agree with is you've got to be in the process. And I had the fortunate advantage of having grown up in this business and had a really intimate knowledge of most of the divisions of the company that we were trying to apply this to. Now, I was by no means an AI expert. Our data scientists and engineers are light years ahead of me in terms of application knowledge, but I knew the processes and I knew what I wanted the outcome to be with the implementation of these tools. And that was a big advantage, I think, for our organization to have that cohesiveness between the leadership and the implementation teams.
Absolutely. Look, job number one of any digital transformation is don't optimize a process that shouldn't exist in the first place. Right, so that's the trap of we went cloud and then we went mobile, and it's like, oh great, okay, cool. Now we can do the same crappy thing we always done, but we'll do it digitally. Let's not do that. And AI is that on steroids, right? Because you can, if you're pointing in the wrong direction, if you're asking the wrong question, you're just moving faster in the wrong direction. So yeah, point number one is figure out how to, from first principles, what should it look like? And the technology is actually the second part of that discussion, right? Which is what's the right way to get to the destination that we've agreed we want to get to. I absolutely love that approach.
That's great. Jordan, so we talked about the changes you did in your organization. How did you communicate your implementation strategy to your organization, and how did you handle that whole change management process?
Well, we've been digital forward for a little more than a decade. We built our own in-house logistics platform called Ship Simple that interacts with our customers as well as our partners in terms of information exchange and communication, as well as our employees. So we had to get buy-in pretty early from people who were well entrenched in decades-old processes that didn't want to digitize or automate certain systems. And really, I think step one was this is, to Jean's point, enhancement, not replacement. You're not going to lose your job to the tablet application that we're implementing here. This is actually going to make your life easier. And my example earlier about the machine operator who now has to do less work or is less pressed for time because he's got better information available to him, or when there's a shift changeover between one operator to another, there's a seamless transfer of knowledge from that first operator to the second operator. So we really needed to make sure that the messaging was friendly, safe, et cetera. And then once they started to see the incremental benefits, really the front line now is the driver of the application improvements. I mean, we've got people coming to us left, right, and center. We actually had to create a system for new feature requests where we prioritize them, because the logistics teams and the operations teams are the ones now that are saying, hey, do you think we could apply this type of a feature? And to Marc's point about bringing knowledge back to the organization, I've got people who are now, researching how AI tools can be applied to things. And you've got a guy that, is supposed to be in charge of your customs documentation saying, hey, we could apply these sorts of, solutions to this process. So I think it kind of snowballs once you get the buy-in from the entire team.
Yeah, that's a great example of, initially you start with fear, and then when you can get them across to adoption, how it just, as you said, snowballs and just drives the organization forward. Jean, can you talk about some of the differences between implementing an AI strategy for process improvements versus R&D product improvement?
Wow, it's an academic question. So in R&D, it's more about exploration. So you are exploring new ideas. So you don't have all the legacy system behind you. So in the R&D, I think you can have more exploration. So actually I'm going to give you an example of pharmaceutical industry, what one of my students working on, how AI is impacting pharmaceutical industries. So in the R&D, the drug discovery, drug candidate identification, you can actually explore the spaces using AI. So you have less of a dependency. But for the process, as Jordan and Marc mentioned, there are a lot of legacy system behind that you have to convince the people. So the process innovation is more about the human side, so understanding the process, convincing the stakeholders. So I would say that's the difference between the two in the implementation. Yep.
Excellent. And Marc, we've talked some of this already, but what are some other common pitfalls or mistakes that you see businesses when they're trying to implement and adopt AI?
Talking technology first, right? We're doing Copilot. Okay, great. Now what? How does it matter to me, to the work that I do? So again, it comes back to change. I think chasing shiny objects, absent of a strategy, picking up on Jean's point, a useful kind of framework. If you imagine, you met a bit of a I won't bore you to tears with consulting frameworks here, but imagine, if you will, on a vertical axis is the customers or the markets that you serve, and on the horizontal axis is the products or the value that you create. And you think about kind of three horizons or three rainbows, right? In the very, very corner of that is the operational kind of improvement sort of stuff. That's great, Copilot makes me faster at drafting an email or getting a Word document out or whatever. The next kind of horizon is thinking about what new products and new markets can I serve, like drug discovery or using the technology to do something radically different. And then the third kind of horizon there would be the stuff that's a radical change for me. So how does Lululemon become a healthcare company? I'm completely spitballing, right? But the idea of how do I radically transform my business because I've got access to data that is unique to me and I can leverage that in interesting ways, and the technology allows me to do that. So again, absent of a strategy that allows you to think about what's the technology going to do, where am I trying to aim it, am I looking for operational improvements, I just want to get more efficient with the way that my business operates, or do I really want to then take those transformational opportunities, right? You're kind of just wandering in the woods a little bit. You're hoping that you're going to sprinkle some Gen AI inside your organization, and somehow you're going to get struck by lightning. It's going to be awesome. We're going to transform it. And so I think it's coming back to the idea of orienting where the organization is going to trying to get to, trying to articulate the scope and scale and pace of the change that's going to impact your organization, and then bringing your people along for that journey, as we've talked about.
So Jordan, when you were implementing your strategy, was there anything that surprised you about the process, or key learnings you obtained from that process that you applied in future times?
Well, I think one of the important pieces, to Marc's point there, is you got to separate the hype from what's real. So you got to set some realistic low-hanging fruit goals, as Jean mentioned, and then you've got to work your way step by step. I don't think waiting for the perfect system to try to implement everything all at once is the right approach with some of these solutions. You've got to take those baby steps. They will inform, based on victories, losses, et cetera, the next path that you go down. So you've got to have that overall vision, but really implement in a staged manner. I think that would be one lesson. I think the messaging within and outside of your organization is also extremely important. We've touched on that, but in our business, it's pretty easy to sell this externally. You've got sustainability, you've got reducing carbon footprint, you've got efficiency, you've got increase in throughput. These are all things that customers and partners love to hear. I think that messaging internally early was extremely important within the organization to get buy-in and make sure implementation was as smooth as possible.
Excellent. And then, Marc, can you walk us through a real-life example where AI delivered measurable ROI for a business?
Yeah, many. Customer service is one where we're seeing big uptake. And again, I think it's an interesting kind of anecdote on a couple of fronts. So the use of generative AI to answer a customer query, to direct it in the right way. Some of those systems are not new. I mean, certainly speaking to a bank, you guys have been on the fore of those, right? But those systems have radically improved. The voice technologies have radically improved. It's understanding intention so much better, and it's actually able to then, not only direct it in the right way, but coach your staff up on that. So lots of implementations in that space. Working with a health food manufacturer here in Vancouver. One of the interesting things there was the first thing they wanted to solve for was they were getting a big volume of inquiries from clients saying what are the ingredients in, like a typical call would be like, what are the ingredients in this product, right? I'm allergic to shellfish or whatever. And so the customer service agents were answering these phone calls and emails. And because the product was changing, you had this constant challenge of coming back to data quality of like, which product, am I got the right one? Is it the 2024 product sheet? No, it's the 2022 and all the ingredients have changed, whatever. So there's all this actually angst inside the team, right? Of like, am I giving the right information? And actually in that case can be like health critical, right? So step number one, arm them with better information. Step number two is how do you transform a customer service inquiry into a sales opportunity? So how do you turn what used to be a cost center for your business into a potential revenue generating business? And most importantly, point number three is how do you create brand loyalty as a result of that interaction? There's nothing, and I think you talked about it, there's nothing more irritating than when you call to get a human on the phone and you get, I'm sorry, I didn't understand that. How do I direct your call? I'm embarrassed to say at a BMO event, I don't bank with BMO, I bank with one of your competitors, and their systems drive me crazy.
It's a good opportunity.
How is that right? I'm sure BMO is way, way better than the competition, right? I'm on the phone going, agent,
Human agent.
right? Just get me in front of a human. And so part of the system build was, again, going back to don't optimize a process that shouldn't exist, is what's the actual interaction you're trying to drive? How can Gen AI be an enabler of a better customer interaction, so to serve up better information to those customers? How can it change the skill set of that team to be a value generator for the business? And how can you use that interaction to drive brand loyalty? That journey is like super transformative, right? It's really mind-blowing for organizations when they figure out, Jordan talked about it earlier, right? How do you put a win on the board? So how do I make somebody's life better? There are people that are showing up at 8:30 a.m. Monday morning and they're answering phone calls. How do I make their job more enjoyable? Point number one. Point number two is how do I drive more value for my organization? And point number three then is how do I transform that customer who was calling with a complaint, like I call when I call my bank, right? Get me an agent. How do I turn that conversation into something that drives brand loyalty for me as a customer? So those are some of the really exciting things that are coming. Strictly on the ROI number, then the ability to reduce the volume of inbound calls that got to the human, we knocked that down by over 30%. So just the time savings of that team that was just fielding calls, the volume of that was reduced by 30%. So coming back to like the idea of just, that's a throughput discussion, right? How do I make that group more efficient? And then what value can I create? Because I give them a different set of tools.
I think that customer service aspect is super important. I mean, Of course, you can implement a chat bot on your website to field some of the basic calls, but there's nothing more frustrating than not being able to get somebody on the phone when you've got a problem that can't be resolved through self-help. And I think at our organization, at least, when we did unlock that, efficiency, especially for our admin and our logistics teams, it wasn't about reducing headcount. It was about freeing those people up to be able to spend more time, as you put it earlier, babysitting. So the system is doing all of the grunt work. Those people have a little more free time to pay attention to customer shipments, to interact. So when you're calling, you're not getting somebody that's busy fielding, 250 emails all day because the system is handling a lot of that traffic. So I think there's an opportunity to keep the human element in the customer service by leveraging AI to maybe take away some of the grunt tasks. I'm sure in that health company example you gave, you're arming that customer service agent with the information, but you've still got a human there to talk to, which is, I think, a lot of people kind of think that the robot's going to replace customer service, and it may one day, but I don't think we're there yet, and I think people still want that human connection.
It's funny, as soon as you started talking about that, every time I call into some helpline and they start asking me questions, I'm like, oh no. Because it generally does not work well. And it just creates a negative experience. So it's an example of how AI can actually work against you in some ways.
If you're not careful, for sure.
So Jordan, how do you measure, you implement an AI initiative, how do you measure success in that?
So I suppose our early initiatives were a little easier to quantify the immediate benefit. I mean, you're reducing container handles, you're reducing truck trips, you've got a measurable CO2, carbon footprint reduction at the end of the year. On those operational efficiencies, I think it's a little bit easier. More recently, we've implemented some applications of OCR within our terminal, so optical character recognition, where we're attempting to make eventually a completely self-aware terminal that maps itself and that instructs operators on the most efficient stacking patterns and identifies containers. You can imagine if you've got a yard with 6,000 different shipments in it and you lose one of them, it kind of backlogs the rest of the day when you're trying to get shipments out on trucks and coordinate rail cars and shipping schedules, et cetera. So I think those earlier ones were a little easier for us. As we kind of delved a little deeper and went to maybe second, third layer benefits, we had to really be careful about how we were defining what that win was. Nowadays, our OCR program is at a point where there's partial automation. It's not fully automated by any means, and we're tracking now how many human overrides there are to the system generated information. So that's one place where we're measuring, okay, in static container positions when we're loading them at certain handling systems, we're at a 95% success rate on the system generated information, whereas in more dynamic environments, trucks rolling by or stackers placing containers, we're at a 45% success rate, and year over year you're just trying to improve those percentages because eventually you're going to get close enough to perfect that it's operating at a level more proficient than humans. But the idea is that eventually this dynamic, ever-changing organism that is a terminal is just a little bit more efficient and a little bit more automated in the planning sense.
That's great. Actually, there can be intangible benefits. I remember talking with you when we were doing this tour. You had actually one process left where someone was moving material by hand. They had to toss some bags, and you were working on eliminating that. And it wasn't about eliminating the job. You're talking about you can only do that job for so long before your body breaks down.
Yeah.
So you think somebody's lost a job, but you've actually kind of saved them from having their body completely deteriorate and not be able to function well.
Absolutely.
Later in life.
Yeah, absolutely.
But Jordan, I'm going to start with you. You're obviously very far along in your AI journey, successful implementation, but a lot of people here maybe are just starting out or dipping their toes into it. So what piece of advice would you give to a business that's just starting out on their AI journey?
Well, I'll respond a little bit to the spirit of your question there, I suppose the AI journey is a little bit like learning in general, where the further along you get, the more you realize there is still yet to come. So we don't feel very deep in the journey at this point, but we have successfully launched quite a few initiatives. And I think that really goes to the point of what I made earlier, is not to wait for the perfect complete ecosystem before trying to extract some wins here. Go for those small initiatives. Start with a very targeted pinch point within your organization, and try to figure out how you can apply some internal knowledge coupled with that AI expertise to resolve that issue, or at least enhance the human's ability to deal with it, and then progress from there. Because certainly the deeper you get, the wider your vision gets, and I suppose the path that you go down is going to change as you realize what opportunities present themselves as you complete each step of the journey.
Excellent, thank you. And Marc, when you think about the businesses that are successfully implementing AI, what are some of the common characteristics that they exhibit?
Well, I've talked a little bit about it already. I think a deep sense of curiosity, a deep sense of dissatisfaction with business as usual. So they want to be progressive. They want to push the boundaries, and they're not afraid to fail, right? Always, like get started is the main message. So if you're not on that journey, absolutely, you have to get your organizations on that, on that path. But kind of that, and go cautiously from the perspective of start typically with your internal processes and operations, because that's the places you can control. When you start to touch your customer, tread carefully in terms of what you expect the system to do and so on. But yeah, that sense of they want to push boundaries, they want to change, they want to create that experimentation, and they're creating the room for their people to experiment and fail in a safe way.
And Jean, over to you, and I think we've talked a lot about this already, but what advice would you give business leaders in this room about how to effectively implement a journey in AI?
I'll wear my PR hat at the moment. So at UBC Sauder School, we are building a good curriculum across the board, from undergrad students who are understanding technology and the business together, to the MBAs who understand technology and business together. They are actually implementing Gen AI into their curriculum. And also, we also have executive education. So if you have a need on reskilling, maybe your executive wants to have more understanding of AI strategy, come to us. So we may be able to help you on the education side. That's what I want to, a piece of advice, and also / PR here.
I want to say thank you very much to all of you. This has been a really interesting discussion. What really struck me, if I look in summary here, is AI seems like this scary concept that people are not quite sure about, but to me it's no different than any other business process or a successful business mantra, which is you have to have a clear strategy, you have to define what you want to do, and then you have to bring your employees along on that journey. AI is not about getting rid of your employees. It's about making them do more efficient and better tasks that's going to grow your business at the end of the day. So it's something that I know Jean has been studying this for 20 years, but it feels like we're still early in the journey of AI. But it's something that I think every business needs to get on board with. And it'll be really interesting to see how this journey evolves over time. And I look forward to our panel in a couple of years when we revisit this. And I'm sure the experience of all of you will be greatly enhanced, and the field and the way it's moving and emerging will be changing rapidly. So thank you again very much for all of you for joining us. On your way out, if you could just say thank you to Marissa on this side and Mani over here. They are the ones that organized and did everything. We were just told to show up and wear a nice suit. So thank all of them, and appreciate again all of you joining us today. Thank you.